The concept for this video will be simple. We'll go through the first 6 levels of laning phase step by step, focusing on all of the smallest details that you need to know in order to improve your ability to win the 1v1. No detail will be spared in this video. This is my straight up guide on how you can gap your lane opponent in solo queue, or gap your friends in a 1v1. And don't worry bot lane mains. This video will primarily focus on solo lanes in the 1v1, but there still will be a ton covered in this video that will help your laning in a 2v2 as well. So with that said, get excited for this video, because man am I excited to make it. This is everything you need to know about early laning in order to beat your opponent and crush them in the 1v1.
My name's Rogue and I played League of Legends professionally for 7 years. Now I'm a full-time content creator and coach for all ranks Iron through to Challenger. So if you want more information of what a coaching session with me will look like, you can find more information by following the link in the video description below.
We're going to start off simple at the very beginning of the game. Now don't worry if you already know the first point or two, these will become much more interesting to higher level players pretty quickly. I just got to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the first thing you want to do is take note of keystones. These will tell you absolutely everything about trading patterns for the lane and how you want to play it out. A top laner with Conqueror, for example, is going to be much stronger in extended trades and all-ins compared to one who has Grasp or Electrocute, who simply wants to proc their rune and then disengage over and over. In mid lane, this is even more important. You want to be sequencing the cooldown of your keystone as often as possible, using it every time it comes up to be more efficient with your poke. Syndra's Q, for example, here does 86 damage for the cost of 40 mana. This is a damage to mana ratio of about 2 to 1. If you combine this with runes though, we can buff up this number massively. Arcane Comet adds 31 damage. Scorch another 20. Our Taste of Blood also procs us to heal us for 17. So now when our Syndra uses her Q, we have the value of 154 damage and healing, but the mana cost remains unchanged. This gives us a now near 4 to 1 damage to mana ratio, which is almost double what we would have had by using this spell without our runes up, which just makes us far more likely to poke our opponent out before we ourselves run out of mana. To help you better play around runes, make sure the first thing that you do when you arrive in lane is to left click your opponent to display this window in the top left of your screen. This window will display all status effects including the cooldowns of runes that your opponent has, and using this you can look for windows to trade. Here I can see that Vex's Electrocute, Taste of Blood, and Mana Flow are all on cooldown, which just gives me the green light to go for a trade, which I win massively because of the rune advantage. Now those were the must cover fundamentals that a lot of people already know. Now we get to talk about the fun stuff. When you enter a lane, you need to first figure out how you're going to take push. We're going to talk about why you want to take push in just a moment, but for now we need to figure out how we're going to do so. This game of Victor vs Syndra is the perfect example. Victor is way stronger in an early fight and will win any trades level 1 with his Q shield, shield bash, airy, and bone plating, while Syndra has the ability to do more damage to minions with the area of effect of her Q. This means that for me on Victor to get push, I need to try and get access to take trades against her. So when I enter the lane and notice that she's standing on the right side of the minion wave, I also go to the right side in order to match her and get access to trades, which allows me to prolong the trade since I'm not pulling that many troops towards me as I fight her. This forces her away and allows me to clear out much of the first wave, eventually gaining the push advantage through trading. In early levels, minions themselves will act as a wall that prevents you and your lane opponent from trading onto each other. If you stand on the opposite side of the minion wave to your opponent, and then they try to trade onto you, they will be forced to stand directly inside of your minions to do so, and the moment they hit you, they'll pull creep aggro and take a ton of damage when trading, which makes it so that these kind of trades are always bad for the aggressor. Instead, by taking the same side of the minion wave as my lane opponent Syndra, I was able to attack her by standing far away from the minions, so I didn't instantly begin taking damage from the creeps. Pay attention to these melee minions here, and note how I step away from them between each attack so they never really catch up to me and do any damage. Also to note is that because the enemy minions are so busy chasing after me, they're not actually attacking my team's minions, which is yet another reason why trading like this is going to help me get push in this matchup. This can change on a game by game basis depending on the matchup that you're playing. When playing Victor vs Vex, my win condition is now the opposite. Vex definitely has a stronger level 1 trade with her Electrocute and her passive Fear, so I instead elect to take the opposite side of the wave and start with my E to avoid her. Now after using my E to poke her, Vex recognizes that she has a window to punish me for it, so she moves up the lane and to the right of the wave to try and match the same side as me, so what I do is move back into the left, placing the minions as a wall between us again to block her. This is one of the main reasons why you want to focus on taking push. Having a bigger mini wave not only gives you level up timers that you can use against your opponent, but it also gives you the ability to use important cooldowns without the threat of being punished for it, because you can just use the massive minions that you have as a wall to hide behind whenever you don't want to trade. For example, Syndra's Q is a short 7-second cooldown. She can use this whenever she wants to liberally poke her lane opponent without much fear. But her W with a longer 12-second cooldown, and most importantly her E with a massive 17-second cooldown, both give massive windows for your opponent to trade back onto you whenever you use these abilities aggressively, which is why you should only use them aggressively within the safety of a big wave. Here I throw up my Q and E in order to poke the enemy Ari, proccing my runes. This gives her a window to trade back onto me while my spells are on cooldown. But she actually can't trade back onto me because she wouldn't be able to inside of this stacked cannon wave that I have, and in addition to this, the next minion I kill gives me level 4 advantage. So again, she can't fight me while she's down a full level, even if I don't have my E. Importantly though, Ari used her charm here in response, which is a massive mistake from her. This is a point where I'm already advantaged because of my level 4 and my bigger minion wave. Ari wasting charm means that now for the next 12 seconds while she doesn't have it, I'm yet again advantaged in another way. So when it comes time for her to try and last hit this cannon minion, she just can't. Then of course, seconds later, I'm able to follow up with yet another QE for poke without the fear of her trading back because again, I can just hide behind this massive minion wave that I have by stacking it. The final thing to keep an eye on when using key abilities is again, the cooldown of your opponent's runes. If they don't have their electrocute up, they won't be able to trade back very well, so you can just throw out that long cooldown and not have to worry. Now that we're taking push and trading well in lane, hopefully you'll be getting your opponent low on health and forcing them to expend their teleport early, which brings us to a new subject, teleport usage. Real quick before we go into this though, I just want to invite you to go subscribe to my channel right now if you haven't already, just in case you forgot to. I know I do that all the time with the YouTubers that I watch. And if you really like my content, you might even be interested to follow my Patreon. On my Patreon, I have thousands of hours of recordings of my coaching sessions that I do with my students, where I've been teaching things like this for years. There is a ton of stuff to learn there that hasn't made its way onto YouTube yet, so feel free to check it out and support me in the process if you'd like to. Now, let's get back to teleport usage. Using your TP is rather simple. You want to force your lane opponent to base before you, then try to stay in lane as long as possible. You're trying to stay as long as possible to generate more gold from minion kills in order to have a better item buy than them. Then after a couple of waves of just farming creeps, you TP back using all the extra money you just made to buy more powerful items than what your opponent bought, and with that, you can beat them. I've got here an example of a top laner who misses this opportunity with his teleport in a situation you see pretty commonly almost every single game. So we start off by setting up a gank. Really good job, Mundo. We get our jungler a kill, happy days. Now, obviously our opponent is going to have to TP in here. So we get to collect an entire wave of minions that he doesn't. He TP's back, so cool, we got an assist, and we got an entire wave worth of minions of more gold. Why would we stop there though? We're still healthy enough to stay and get our wave in, so let's take another one. So now our Mundo player has taken 2 additional waves worth of gold and XP, before having to recall and TP back. But let's ask again, do we still have to base and TP back? You only have to base and TP back when you're no longer able to farm minions because you're being zoned, but I don't think that's the case. We're only down an amplifying tome, but we are up a full level and the wave is coming into us. So my advice for our Mundo player, instead of basing right now and spending 900 gold, why don't we stay for 2 more waves, allow our opponent to push us in, farm onto tower for 2 more waves, then we base TP back with closer to 1300 gold just before the Void Grub spawn at 5 minutes 30. We hit level 6, we have a massive item differential because of all the extra 2 waves that we just got. We also get the opportunity to trade onto Mordekaiser. So instead of basing and TPing back with 900 gold spent, we could instead trade on our opponent for the next 1 minute, take some health away from them, make an extra 300 to 400 gold, and then when we TP back, we'd be up in items by even more, and our opponent would be half health and would be full health, which would just easily set up for a solo kill, and in this case, also the Void Grubs. We can see an example of this being done here. After good early trades in the early levels, Vex is low on health and unable to farm anymore, so she makes the correct decision and bases and TPs back with an amplifying tome. I then manage to stay an extra 2 waves, increasing the amount of gold that I have. This takes me from 900 gold to almost 1300 gold. I then, after a small oopsie on my part, base and TP back to lane with a now massive item lead over her. When I get back to lane, Vex has half health and half mana, and is massively behind in items compared to me, which essentially now locks her into a situation that she can't escape any other way than by recalling and losing an entire minion wave. This is the ultimate goal of your early game, denying XP from your opponent. Let's say you force your opponent to base early and they lose an entire wave, denying them about 40% of a level worth of XP. Well, now all you have to do is leverage that 40% of a level lead over them. You can do this by playing passively on waves where you have the same level as them, but on waves where that XP lead is realized in the form of a level up, you can then play hyper aggressive in order to force them to base again. Here I have such an XP lead. So the moment I hit level 6 before Vex, I dump all of my damage, including my ultimate, on Vex just to force her to flash, but more importantly than taking her flash, I take her health away. Because of this trade, Vex is now so low on health that she is effectively useless, and the only way she will get that health back is just by basing and losing an entire wave, so she does that, which again increases my XP lead over her. A minute later when we get back to lane, despite the fact that she has a bigger wave than me, I have level 7 before her because of the XP lead that I had from making this play. So I can now start bullying her by freely poking her using my long cooldown abilities without the fear of her counter trading onto me, because with my level lead, she just can't counter trade, which is something we learned earlier. I will yet again freely dump my ultimate when I have a level advantage just in order to get a good trade to put Vex low on health again. Vex now, yet again, has no choice but to base and lose yet another wave. So in this way, I'm simply leveraging the small XP lead I have in the windows where it leads to a level advantage. Every time I do this, I'm forcing her to base and lose more waves, which again, further increases the level lead and the percentage of waves that I will then have this advantage for going forward. In the end, with repeated use of this technique, I've managed to gain an XP lead that is the equivalent of more than 100% of a level lead, which leaves me now in a position where she will now never again, no matter what, be the same level as me, which now cements this as a permanently winning lane that will never again, no matter what the lane state is, be a winning situation for her. This is by far the biggest thing people get wrong in the early game. They try so hard to help their teammates early on when there are useless fights happening in the river, when they should instead let their opponent run off to go to the useless fights, while you instead stay in lane and gain just a small XP lead that you can then start using to leverage against your lane opponent around the level up timers. XP is far, far more important in the early game than what gold is, and a relatively small XP lead over time can balloon into a massive one. Then once you've finally checkmated your opponent into a permanently losing position, you can then finally branch out and look to help others. It's just like what they tell you on an aeroplane. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you try to save the children seated next to you. In this analogy, your jungler is a child, although I'm sure you probably play enough League by now to work that one out. Thanks for watching the video, everyone. Remember to subscribe, and as always, guys, have a great day.